Hi, my name's Alan Richardson, and you can find me at EvilTester.com because this is essentially a testing and IT talk, but it's also a marketing talk. So if you look at Talotics.com or digitalonlinetactics.com, I've got a marketing site where I explain marketing tactics, and this talk is all of that together about how we can open source our profile. And if you want the slides and things, again, that's all open sourced, and you can go to github.com/eviltester/open source profile, and you'll find all the slides and mind maps and everything for this talk. And I've pre-recorded this so that we can hopefully engage in the chat as the talk is happening, and we'll have a live Q&A at the end. So I just want to start by saying that open source is not just code, right? We often think of it as just code, but it's knowledge. Code is codified knowledge. And the more that people share what they learn, they share their experiences, they share their examples, they share how they did things, why they did things, what mistakes they made, the more and the faster our craft will advance, because we learn from each other and we can build on each other. That to me is the essence of open source, and everyone can contribute to that. Everyone can open source their material. So what I want to do in this talk is go through my relationship with open source, a kind of general theory of open source, the psychology and attitudes that are associated when you do open source and to try and get the most out of that, and some approaches and tooling to that. Now, I have way more stuff that I wanted to cover than I can actually cover in the time. So when you look at the slides on GitHub or wherever you find them, you'll see that a lot of the tooling and approaches and how-tos are actually in the extras, the appendices for the talk. So I'm going to try and focus in really on the attitudes, the why, but not the details of the how. So I have been essentially open sourcing for 25 plus years. I probably started seriously open sourcing as much work as I possibly could in terms of code in 2012. But previous to that, I've open sourced knowledge, I've written tools, I've made them freeware, I've put this stuff out there. And what happens if you incrementally open source your work over a long period of time is you create a huge backlog of material. I have 670 plus blog posts. It used to be up at 900, but I trimmed them down and collated them together. Because remember, nothing's fixed. We can iterate and we can improve. I have 100 plus public repos. I assume there's some of them are private, but I think there's 100 plus public repos on GitHub. Hundreds of YouTube videos, some on different channels, because I want as many different channels and opportunities for sharing as I can. So I have multiple blogs, I have multiple YouTube channels, depending on what I'm trying to share. And that material has converted, because we can monetize our open source work, into training courses and books and tools and stuff. But what I want you to pay attention to is that 25 years incrementally building up, because a lot of people are put off when they see people's open source profiles and go, I can't do that. I can't do as much as that. I don't have time to do that. This is incremental. This is building gradually. You don't have to start with 800 blog posts. No, you build up to it. You share gradually, and you build up the habit of doing this. Now, if we shared everything, we're going to need multiple channels, right? Because you're going to have multiple interests. You're going to have testing interests, other interests. What we want to do is create as many options for sharing, so we're not limited by what we share. So some people have one Twitter account, and on that one Twitter account, they put their personal stuff, their work stuff, and music stuff, a whole amalgamation of things, because it's essentially a social network. And they're being sociable, and that's fine. I create multiple channels to be more focused, to improve discoverability, because I'm applying some marketing techniques onto this as well. And I don't want to limit my sharing. I don't want to think, well, I can't put this on my professional feed. So I create multiple channels for this. And what you'll see as we go through this talk is that I've kind of tried to share everything. So a lot of people worry about what they're going to share, whether it's going to be professional or not. I don't worry about that, because I have multiple channels. So you can see here I've got source code for games I never really finished, choose your own adventure game tooling, little utilities that I've written that no one else will possibly ever need, but they might. And that's the whole point of the open sourcing. We're putting out things that people can build on if it's useful to them. And the 2012 date that you see here is it's not just plucked out of the air. I went to Let's Test in 2012 and Julian Harty was doing a talk on open source testing. And he was talking about, well, what if we open sourced all our work? How can we do that? And that's a really important concept. And it's one of the things that we try to do in Black Ops testing. So if you would go to blackopstesting.com, you'll find that we open sourced a bunch of our testing material, how we test, thought processes, things like that. But when I listened to Julian's talk in 2012, I just thought, well, what if I just open source everything as much as humanly possible? Now, I don't open source everything. I have some tools that I use that are proprietary, but as much as possible, I try and open source and share because it advances what we're doing. Now, I didn't start this in 2012. 2012 is when I deliberately started open sourcing. I've been putting stuff out there for years. This is one of the first commercial tools I tried to write, and I started selling it in I think 1992 and then made it freeware in 1994. But this is the second version of the tool, so I must have started in 1990 thereabouts. And it's just, this is code, and I'm going to try and change your mind around what we open source, but the point is incrementally. I've been doing this for decades and I'm now in the habit of doing it. And what I want to try and do for you is to help you build up that habit, to demonstrate what we can do. And ultimately this talk is about two different things. It's about marketing and it's about sharing and open sourcing. Because if all we do is share, we put stuff out there, no one will find it. No one will care. So we have to figure out how to make it discoverable. And that's what marketing is. Right? We're trying to get attention. We're trying to make it so that people can discover it. We're trying to make it so that when people find it, the stuff we find is something that they want to share themselves, to make it a source that we can open source. And so we have to combine the marketing and sharing information. And for the last, 10 years, I've been learning marketing, reading through marketing books. I've got a website, talotix.com, about marketing, where I share marketing tips as well. So combining all this makes it more powerful. So what I also want to do is try and reframe what open source is. So this is the definition from opensource.com. And it says the term open source refers to something people can modify and share because its design is publicly accessible. So what we're talking about here is, what can people modify? Well, any time you put knowledge out, people are modifying it because they're interpreting it. They're trying to understand it. They're trying to make it theirs. It's publicly accessible because it's online on blogs or GitPages or wherever, or Twitter or social media, wherever you put it. And people can share it because they can retweet it, they can re-promote it, and they can add extra value as they do so. Open source is not just about code, but that's the first thing we think of. When we think of open source, we tend to think source code, open source tools and libraries, WebDriver, all the test tools that we use. But if we think like that, we're essentially limiting our options. We're reducing the participation of open source to people who can code. And what we're trying to do is increase the participation to everyone that can share knowledge, and that is everyone. That is you, that is me, that is everyone that you know. So when we think about open source, because what I'm trying to do is reframe this a little bit. What we're talking about is stuff that is free to access. It's downloadable. We can use it for our own basis. It's a source of learning. I learn so much from open source blog posts, open source code when I'm reading through it. This is pretty much how I learn now. I seek out sources of knowledge. So I require people to share. I require more and more people to share their knowledge. And it's in a format that can be changed. Now, the thing about knowledge is it changes when we receive it because we interpret it. So I'm trying to reframe things a bit. Sometimes I call this going meta because it's going above what we looked at to try and build a different model. And sometimes I'm just talking about reframing it. Reframing was covered by Richard Bandler in the book Reframing. And he's talking about it as a creative process that helps us look at things in a different way, in a way that is more helpful to us. So if I looked at open source and reframe it, I'm not just looking at it in terms of code and tools, I'm looking at it as knowledge, to reframe it as something that everyone can participate in. And to help reframe, sometimes what I'll do is I'll just look at the words. So when I look at the word open, I'm thinking about something welcoming, something we can go into, something that we have no barriers to entry, something that we have permission to look at and use. And when I think about source, I'm thinking about sources of knowledge. How can I get something, obtain something? Place where there's a central place where I can get this thing from. That's what it means to me, the open source, the source of knowledge. So it's not code, it's not libraries. We have to go beyond code in order to increase the ability to participate in it. What have we open sourced? Our testing results, our ability to test, the way that we test, and help people share that. So for this, what I want you to think about, and I want you to think about as you go through this talk, is, well, what do you have that you can share, what that you can make publicly accessible, that other people can then modify and build on, and then they might share it, and then you learn, and we keep advancing. And when you think about it, you will have more than you think, and you may well be sharing things that you haven't yet categorized as open source. You may be sharing your knowledge and experience on social media. You may be using Twitter. You may be blogging and open sourcing your thinking. You may be uploading presentations on SlideShare or graphs that you've created, or you may be creating simple videos on YouTube or podcasts or whatever. All of this I view as open source knowledge because we build on it, we interpret it, we hopefully make it our own and incorporate it into our own models and communicate it in our own way. And together, all of this creates a content web, an online source of information you've put out, a portfolio that people can look at. Now, very often we look at GitHub as a place where we host code. But GitHub can be used to host way more than code. And when you look in the extras on this presentation, you'll see that there are a huge amount of awesome lists, just people curating lists of stuff. In Black Ops Testing, we put out our testing notes, and you can find testing notes on my GitHub. There's the raw source for posts, there's cheat sheets, PDFs. We can use GitHub to host websites. It's not just about code. It's a central source of repository for information. And I'm going to show you some examples of that later on. But there are so many ways that you can share your knowledge and experience and contribute to the world and just open source value. And one of the interesting things for this is when you're not just doing code, knowledge has a discovery advantage. And by that I mean tools and code are often in one place. So they'll be on GitHub or GitLab or Bitbucket. Very often they lack SEO, search engine optimization, the ability for people to discover them. So they rely on people using them, adopting it, and sharing that information. Knowledge is different. Right? Knowledge is discoverable. It's indexed by search engines. It spreads organically. It's a lot easier for people to share your blog post because they come in, they find it through a search, they read it in a minute, then they go, that was useful, I will share that. To share a tool, they have to go, they have to find it, they have to download it, they have to install it, they have to learn to use it. That might take hours before they can possibly share it. And they might not have used it enough that they feel comfortable sharing it. Tools lack a marketing department where a lot of these concepts normally live. Knowledge is essentially inbuilt marketing because it is discoverable, it is shareable. So there are typically some obvious paths to follow when we do this, just so you understand the approach. Because you have the advantage that I'm sharing experience and knowledge, so you can take a different path than the one that most of us take. The one that most of us take is ad hoc. So we randomly jump between moments and glimpses, random tweets, things we've learned, things we've found, what's on our mind at this moment, stuff that we find interesting. We'll put code snippets, something that I've just knocked up, I'll put on Gist. I might write a couple of blog posts on my experiences, just randomly putting things out there. I may have some projects on GitHub that I will incrementally develop. And it'll just be quite random. They won't link together. We can massively boost this and maximize our open source portfolio if we do it deliberately and understand what we're doing. We build social media profiles on as many social media platforms as we can to give us opportunities for sharing things. We deliberately curate information. That becomes something that we do. We find things that are useful to us and share them with other people. And we might list those somewhere. We share our examples. We share what we learned from those examples. We're adding value. We're not just sharing code. We're adding value in the learning process. We might take all those examples and pull them together into a product that makes it easier for other people to use. We might take our lessons learned and figure out how can we communicate this effectively to other people so that they can learn, and we teach that. That has a side effect that we learn even more. And then we start linking all this together. So our blog posts embed the videos we create, which links off to the code. And we share the blog posts on social media, which links back to our main blog post. And we create a mixed media content web. We're not just randomly putting stuff out there. We're building an actual open source portfolio that links together. So I just want to spend a little bit of time looking at the psychology around this and some of the motivations for this, because there are personal benefits that you can get from this. Your skill will improve. The more you blog, the better you will write. The better you will be able to pull your thoughts together. When you are teaching and explaining things and building little examples, it strengthens your knowledge because you understand it more. You will be experimenting things. You will feel more free to experiment and share what you're doing, which helps create more content. And it helps you get your message out. The reason I started speaking at conferences, because I went to conferences and I saw people on stage and what they were saying did not match my experience. My experience was not being represented here. I needed to get my experience and my message out. And then that was useful. That increased your profile. Now, there may be public benefits to this. It's hard to say, right? But public benefits are a secondary gain. Your increased profile. People know who you are. People are reading and consuming your stuff. But it's hard to assess the value of that. Because a lot of time you're told, well, if you promote your stuff, then you will find it easier to get jobs and things like that. All of this is secondary gain. What we want to do is make sure we're focusing on creating content that is useful, building up our personal skills. Anything else is a secondary gain, and there's no guarantees it will actually make a difference in terms of getting a better job, because very often hiring companies don't review people's public profiles. I have my blog listed on CVs. I've gone to work job interviews and people have no idea that I've got a blog. People have no idea that I've got a presence. They have no idea that there's stuff on GitHub. But when you're interviewing a company that does look at those things, it gives you a massive edge over anyone else because you are sharing your information, and also you're sowing seeds. You don't know who's reading it, and it grows in unexpected ways. I mean, everybody who has shared stuff has had the experience of someone emailing them or coming up to them and said, I read that thing that you wrote, that was really useful to me, that really helped in this way. I saw your video, I saw this code snippet, we used that. Unexpected ways, we're sowing the groundwork because we're sharing, and everyone can benefit from that. So one of the things that we have to do is handle objections, because as soon as we say, do this, then people are going to have objections. That's a natural part. Brian Tracy, when he's teaching sales, explains that treat objections as requests for further information, right, to help you sell better. But we can use that ourselves in terms of overcoming our objections, overcoming the barriers, the things that stop us sharing. One of the objections people have is they don't want to show their mistakes. Or we're still learning, I don't really want to put my stuff out. And the reason I'm showing you this is you can see that the JSP diagrammer, that's code that doesn't really work. It doesn't really compile. There are bugs and mistakes in there. But it's also got the thesis that I wrote at university. So it's a knowledge sharing exercise, and there's value in there. I show my mistakes. When I do online training courses, I have essentially deliberate mistakes, and they're mistakes I've made in the past I put into there so that people can see the mistakes and know how to overcome them. If we do not show our mistakes and errors, other people think everyone else is perfect and they can't start, and they have no idea how to overcome or push them forward. Part of the reason for sharing when we are still learning and when we make mistakes is because we have just gone a little bit further than someone else. So someone else is going to find that next step, that tiny incremental step, very useful. Yours could be the information that tips that person onto the next level. Whereas someone with a massive amount of experience may not know how to communicate or reach that person that wants to take that next step. We have no idea who needs our help. So we put out the things as we are learning, because everyone is still learning. That's the whole point. That's why we share. We share so that people can learn from it, and then they can share and we can learn from that, and we build up. That's the whole point. One of the other reasons people don't like to share is that they say, well, I'm not an expert. I don't want to show the limits that I have. So I picked these two examples because I am not an expert in Perl. I am not an expert in Smalltalk. These bits of code demonstrate my limits in those areas. But I'm trying to share what I've learned. I'm trying to share my experience, not my expertise. That process is what I'm trying to share. And any limits that I have are time bound. People look at that and they'll see, hopefully, 2012. He might be a Perl expert by now because it's 2012. So we keep sharing, we keep advancing. And the other thing I just want to remind people is that we often look at people and go, oh, that person's an expert. What an expert really does is an expert has lots of learning and lots of experience, and they codify it into models. And they try and communicate that model, and they've learned how to communicate that model well. But essentially what they're doing is they're making it up based on their experience in that model. That's what an expert does. It's just that they say it really authoritatively because they have a lot of expertise in that area, a lot of experience in that area. Expert just means we are learning. We are learning how to communicate. We are building our own models. That's the really important thing about knowledge. We're giving out the knowledge. People are taking it and building on it and adapting it for themselves. So other objections, I might not be good enough. Yeah, because you don't have enough experience, so you're learning. Don't compare yourself to other people, right? You are, if you're learning, better than you were. That's important. You can share that. You demonstrate that you're moving forward. Now, a valid objection is that I can't share my work. It's proprietary. So what we do is we don't share our work. We share what we learned. We generalize. We reframe. We create new examples, better examples that are simpler, that make those points we're trying to get across clearer. We show what we learned through the work. So we don't just show our work. We show what we learned, what our experience was. We add value to that learning process. Another objection people have is they don't have time. 25 years incrementally building, but we do have to still find the time in there. So there are hacks we can use, tactics. We can start by curating and sharing other people's work. That's open sourcing, helping other people grow, sharing knowledge, and we're building the habit as we do that. We're learning how to use the platforms that we'll share on. A good tactic that I use that helps me is to reflect on a daily basis. I like to reflect, I like to sit down and think about what I've learned because that helps me grow, but I also like to document and write down what I've learned, document my reflection process, because then I can share that. And every day on Patreon, I have a blog post where I'm sharing something that I've learned or a question or an answer. That helps me grow. It helps build up a portfolio. Sometimes I'll collate that into blog posts. The point is to build in incrementally what we're doing. Because the thing is, the more that you share, the less you actually care what people think. And it doesn't really matter if your older stuff stinks because you moved on. And there's new stuff that you're drawn to and you build and you gain momentum. Right, that's the aim for this open source stuff. So exercise, the just share exercise. So every day for a week, I want you to create a tiny bit of content. Create a video on Instagram. Now the benefit of this is Instagram videos can be a max of 1 minute. So I'm essentially asking you to spend 1 minute a day with your phone creating a video, posting it to Instagram. Or a tweet about something you learned, something you saw, share a piece of content that was useful, anything that you are naturally doing to learn, to promote your experience, share. You can create a micro blog post on Facebook or LinkedIn, just post with more words. That's what a micro blog post means. And you're sharing. One of the benefits I had from doing the Instagram thing I did it for about a month. Every day I put together a little post, a little video on Instagram. And what was great is I realized no one's watching. You share, no one cares. No one's out there looking through all your stuff. But it taught me that I could extemporize, that I could take a concept and riff on it for a minute, and it helped me do timing. And I noticed that after doing that for a month, when I did a conference talk, I felt much more comfortable on stage. There's secondary gain to all of this, but we're building up the habit. So when you have these objections, we work through them. We do the work. We figure out, why do I have this objection? What would happen if I did? Because objections are something that we ask questions about to push it forward. So what's the attitude that we need in order to do this? So I'm going to try and say that you have to love the output, the thing that you are sharing and creating. You have to love the process, that act of creation. You have to love the learning that you're gaining by doing it, the constant improving of how you can share and create. That doing is what you have to love, because sharing takes work, and it takes less work to tweet things. It takes less work to do microblogs. It takes more work to do videos. It takes more work to do podcasts and blog posts. But you have to not do it because of what you think you're going to gain. Not do it because you think you're going to get a lot of feedback. Not do it because people are going to like your stuff. Not do it because people are going to say, hey, that's great, that's brilliant. You don't do it for the external reinforcement. You do it because you love the process, and because you have something to share that you see as being important, that helps you shape the world in tiny increments. So Marcus Cicero said, I criticize by creation, not by finding fault. I think this is really important if you're thinking about creating content to open source it. I used to create book reviews, and some of the book reviews would be negative. I don't do that anymore. I've deleted all those book reports because I don't think it helps. I don't want to criticize. What I want to do is, if I find a book that's not useful, then I will present my opinion and reasons around the topic of that book. So that book that I don't like might encourage me to create a post that has my views by creating something new. So we're trying to push new stuff out there, not bring everyone else down, because guarantee that thing that you didn't like, someone else will find useful. Another quote that's related to that, which I've kind of had in mind since I was a teenager when I first read this: I must create a system or be enslaved by another man's. Right? It's our pretty much job to build our own models of the world so that we're not trapped by other people. We learn what they have because they've open sourced it. We build on it and create our own models of the world. But we push those out as our own opinions. We don't reason and compare. We don't continually compare back to other people, because then we're having to reframe what we do in their terms. We can shape the world by creating new things, by creating our thoughts, by shaping ourselves and improving, and then sharing our knowledge. So I do have examples in here, and they're mine, and that's not to show off. That's simply because I'm drawing from things that I've created, because I want to demonstrate that this is key. This is really important to what I do. I try and share on a daily basis. You might not see it all, because some of it goes into Patreon. Some of it is incrementally building up into talks like this at some point come through. But I can also answer questions like, well, why did you do this? How did you do this? What works? What didn't? And that's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to share the lessons learned and the approaches to what we're doing. So when it comes to sharing, some simple approaches are just putting out pointers to information. Because a lot of people go, I don't know what to share. I don't have any content ideas. Share pointers to information, curate information, do microblogs, little couple of paragraphs on LinkedIn. What people often think of when they're sharing are the permanent stakes in the ground. I must have a blog. I must have a blog post. But then they think of them as fixed. They're not fixed. Anything that you can edit is semi-permanent. You can change it. Things that you can't edit are time-bound. This recording is time-bound. I can't edit this recording once it's been released. I can delete it. I can create a new one because things evolve. And you can sometimes monetize these things as well. So these are approaches that we'll go through. And you can use a lot of social media to do all of this. You don't need to set a lot of stuff up. Pretty much if you had Twitter and LinkedIn, you've got a blog, you've got the ability to share things, you've got places to put videos. What we're doing is just trying to gradually evolve. So let's have a quick look at Twitter. What can we open source on Twitter? Well, we can open source links. We can curate pointers to information that we find useful. We can put out thoughts. We can create tweet storms, sequences of tweets that reply to each other if we want microblogs. And it's really important to set up your profile so that you have the opportunity to do this. When you do set up your profile, make sure you put your photo in, have a banner. Again, there's free software available to create this. Now what I've done, I'm going to give away secrets, my profile is optimized for SEO. Right? If people are searching for software testing consultant, my profile will come up because I put that in my name. That's not my name. My name is not Alan Richardson, software testing consultant, but I'm optimizing for discoverability. I'm trying to do the marketing to help people find what I'm putting out, because I think it's really important that we try and share this stuff. What we're doing is, a lot of people look at it and go, well, it's a social network. I don't really view it as a social network. I view it as a content sharing platform. All these things are content sharing platforms to me because that's what I'm using them for. I'm open sourcing and sharing the information. And we don't just have to stick with Twitter. We can start with a blog post, then look at the things in there and tweet about it. We can tweet links to our blog posts. We could put out lots of tweets, then collate them into a blog post, right? The whole point of marketing really is about repurposing, taking one source of content, putting it out in multiple forms and linking all those together to boost discoverability. So you're sharing your knowledge and open sourcing at the same time that you're raising your profile through those marketing aspects of discoverability. So with Twitter, don't go out and go, it's followers, because followers is the secondary gain. What I'm doing is I'm trying to share information. But if you do want followers, use it as a social network. Follow people, interact with them, leave comments, do all that good social stuff. But what you also want to do is discoverability. So through search, so adjust your profile, use keywords and hashtags in your posts when you put it out. You can help other people. When they share information and you quote it, or you retweet it, add a quote, explain why you found it useful, add the extra value, put more hashtags in to make their content more discoverable, right? You're building on the content that other people have put out there. This is a tool that I wrote called Chatscan, right? And it basically just shows me posts that have links in it because I'm trying to learn. I'm trying to look for content. I'm trying to learn from other people who have open sourced their work. But the key point here is that Chatscan.com, that should be a .com, oh no, I'm showing my mistakes, is about learning from others, and it's open source. So if you went off to GitHub, you can see the source for Chatscan, the Twitter client. But I wrote this as a tool to help me, and then I open sourced it, where the code might help other people, and I put it on Chatterscan.com to make it discoverable, and other people might use it. Looking at the analytics, not many people use it. I think there's about 50 users, but that's fine because I use it and I get massive value out of it, and it didn't take that long. We're building up a whole series of material over time. So LinkedIn is another platform who might decide to put stuff. I try to keep LinkedIn professional. It's got a different profile pic. It's got a different picture of me because this is my professional face. But again, what I've also done is I've changed the descriptions for SEO to make them discoverable, because SEO applies everywhere. And what I do is I look at other people's profiles, see what formatting they've put in their profile, copy and paste the Unicode that they've got, look at how they're using it, look at what they're using it for. Because I view another person's LinkedIn profile as an open source of knowledge that I can learn from to build a better profile, right? Treat things as open source when they are open sourced. One thing that's very useful to do on LinkedIn as a quick tip is to use the project section, right? There's a whole bunch of things you can add in your profile. You can add PDFs, publications, whatever else. Use the project section to link back to your blog or any GitHub projects you've made where you're sharing information. Use these things effectively. And part of doing that is by reframing it. One thing we're really good at with testers is we look at functionality in software and we go, how can I abuse this? How can I make this fail? What can I put in here that will not work? Get in the habit of doing that with any social media platform, any tool that you use, and figure out, how else can I use this? What can I make this do? It says project, but maybe project just means something that I'm working on, like a blog. Here's an article that I've written, project, right? And put the stuff out there. Now, on LinkedIn, we can create posts. They're essentially a microblog. You get, 500 characters, can't remember, a couple of paragraphs, but we can share longer form content that we can on Twitter. We can still share links to other people's work. We can reshare other people's things. Now, this is ordered in terms of what is more likely to be discoverable, what is more likely to get views. Microblogs, posts are much more likely to get views if you're sharing your experiences. On LinkedIn, I try to avoid too many opinions, non-work stuff, but find out what works for you. Learn to use it and adapt it your way and own it. It'll be different from mine. You'll get your success. You'll get different ways of doing this. So just as a quick example, this is a post that I put out. It's essentially a microblog post. It's a kind of experience thought type thing. It asks some questions, but you can see that it had 41,000 views. That's quite a lot of views, and that's more than a blog post is likely to get. And this is organic. Anyone can achieve like these number of views on LinkedIn if you write posts in this style. And this is a way of growing your portfolio. Now, essentially, it was a microblog post, so it was sharing experience and advice. It had hashtags in there for discoverability because some people search for hashtags, some people follow hashtags. It has SEO keywords in the text to make it searchable. All of these are marketing techniques that I'm applying to the stuff that I'm putting out. But it's also repurposed from a blog post. I'd written this blog post years ago. The blog post probably hasn't had as many views as this. I cut it down for this microblog and shared it on here and repurposed it and put it out. Now, the thing to be aware of is that posts are transient. They're short-lived. They appear in people's feed for a short period over time, then they don't get visited. And that's why a repurposing strategy is really important, because we want to move them into a form that is more longer lived, either a blog post, a LinkedIn article, a video, and take the contents from all these little micro posts or transient sharing into other articles. If you're creating content, you're saying, here's a useful link. You could pull that into a blog post and say, here's 5 things I found useful this week. Here's 10 things I learned this month. Here's 10 great blogs to follow. Lists. People love lists. Articles, LinkedIn articles. So LinkedIn is essentially a blogging platform when it has articles. Now, what I find interesting is the metrics here are views in the feed. So it looks like, oh, it's not really worth it. There's only 756 views. LinkedIn articles are indexed by search engines, which means that if people search for the right terms, they'll find it on the web and be linked to that article. I don't see the stats for that. So more people are reading this than I know, but it's an out-of-the-box blogging platform. It's longer term. You could start on LinkedIn and then syndicate it to other sites, right? What we want to do is use these capabilities to help us. How do we use LinkedIn? Well, it's the same way you do Twitter pretty much. You share content, you write posts and articles, you connect with people because then they will see your content. That's why we connect on LinkedIn, so that other people will share or see your content. When you do connect with people, connect with a message, right? There's nothing worse than just people have clicked on the connect button. LinkedIn says, oh, look at all these people you might want to connect with. And you go, yes, I do. I want to connect with that person, that person, that person, that person, that person, that person. What you're essentially doing is spamming people's inbox. I go onto LinkedIn now. I have 90 connection requests, which is then going to take me time. So you're just causing work for me if you don't put a message in. Put a message in, it's easy. I go, yes, I will accept your connection. Otherwise, I have to look you up. Go, are you a real person? And the other thing is, what we're trying to do is we're trying to build a network so that we can share, right? We're trying to open source. So when you connect with people and they say you've connected, don't immediately follow it with an ask. Can you help me get a job? Can you answer these questions? Can you do this for me? Because we're there to share. We're open sourcing so that people can build on the information that we're putting out. We're not just there to take. View it as a content sharing, open sourcing platform where we can share our knowledge, build our portfolio, show the projects we're working on, help the world. Now you will have a natural style that will develop over time. So some people share everything on Twitter. Here's what I had for breakfast. They'll stick that out. Some people love to comment. So they'll use Twitter. They'll reply to a lot of tweets. They'll go on LinkedIn. They'll read a lot of posts and write comments. They might not put out stuff in their own feed, but they'll be sharing a lot of stuff. And that's important too. Any comment you have can be turned into or repurposed to long form content. LinkedIn posts, Facebook posts, articles, blogs. You can cut things down, put them on Twitter. Do whatever is comfortable, but learn how to use these sites in combination. And the reason that I focused on Twitter and LinkedIn for so long is that a lot of people say, I need to create a blog. No, you don't. What you need to do is just start sharing your content. And Twitter and LinkedIn essentially give you a blog through articles. You can microblog through posts. You can do tweet storms on Twitter, tweets that reply to each other. You can upload media directly into LinkedIn. You don't need to set up a YouTube account. You can upload it to Twitter. Right? Essentially, there's no excuses. If you want to share, the options are there. So much poetry in this talk. You can curate content. You can share links to useful information. You don't need to create a blog. You can just start using these features that exist. You can have a running start that many of us didn't have because a lot of these platforms were not available. You can start faster. You can share more easily. Now, if you do start blogging, I think it's a useful thing to do because you want to at some point own the domain that all this content is under. And you can host it on WordPress, Blogger, Medium. If you do use tools like that, use hosted tools. Like if you're going to use WordPress, don't set up a WordPress blog on some site. Use WordPress.com. Because otherwise, I've hosted my own WordPress. It got hacked. That was annoying. It's more secure if you use the main sites. But I don't use these tools anymore. I use static generators. So I use Hugo for all my blogs and host them on Netlify. If I'm hosting on GitPages, then it's Jekyll, but it's static sites and it's relatively easy to learn how to use, and you can host your own domains on here for free. Everything is free now. There are so few barriers to entry. It's incredible. And what I want you to think of is reframing this. You can repurpose content. So content has a canonical form. It has the single source of truth of that content. So if you write an application that's open source, it's got code, that will be on GitHub. But there's also the application where it is hosted or downloadable. Or you're writing a blog post that's canonical. But then there are all these shared forms, all the cut down versions that you put on LinkedIn, all the shared promotions of it on Twitter. Right, the shared form, canonical form. And what we have is when we have the canonical form and we have it in blogs, we can syndicate that through RSS. This is one of the disadvantages of LinkedIn. There's no RSS feed for articles. There is an RSS feed on GitHub, right? You can subscribe to posts that are on there. And if you want to, you can manually syndicate posts. So if you have an RSS feed, aggregate it into the ministryoftesting.com feeds and that'll appear in a whole bunch of stuff. That's really useful for making your work discoverable. But you can also manually repost it on Dev.to or Dzone or Medium if you want to, because that's got a paywall. I tend not to use it. And you can add a canonical link, which means a link in the metadata to your content as the original content, so you get more weight in the search engines, which again helps your discoverability, and you can add backlinks back to your content. So it's about making your work open and discoverable as much as possible. So key principles are to try and add value. Even though you're curating, you're saying, I read this blog post, this is really useful, it was written by someone else. You add value by saying, I read this blog post and it is useful. When you tweet, you share your experience, your learning. You're trying to give more than you ask, because the benefit is in the creation, not the feedback that you're getting back. You have to learn some marketing to help you optimize for discoverability, to help you get your message out further. And open sourcing has an information advantage here because it's searchable. Now we can use GitHub for information hosting. A lot of people look at GitHub and they go, this is just code, we'll use this for code. No, it's information. As soon as you create an account, you can create a GitHub Readme. And as a minimum now, you have a page where you can share stuff. This is the github.com/EvilTester/EvilTester readme.md, because it's the readme process in GitHub. And it's essentially a web page. I have multiple index pages, home pages, landing pages on the web. GitHub is one of those through its README. And anyone can do this because it's free and we're just writing Markdown, a simple text file that gets converted into HTML. You don't really need to know HTML in order to do this. And if you want to learn how to do this, someone on GitHub, the Matthias Singers, has a GitHub repo called Awesome README, which is a list. People on GitHub create lists. They curate content that other people can find useful. That's one of the good non-code uses of GitHub. Create a repo, put up a list of stuff. People will use that because that is a source of value, and you're sharing and you're open sourcing the things that you've learned. And this is a list of READMEs and how to go about creating your own README and setting it up. And if you want to look at some examples, you can look at mine. These are all the links to my preview, the repo where that preview is stored, and the actual content for that repo, because repos are not just for code, right? We're not just open sourcing code here. We're open sourcing our information. And I've got an example. EvilTester/GitPages test is an example blog, which is hosted on GitPages. So you can see how to host a website on GitHub. And there are other places that you can go. If you click on these links in the slides, it will take you to other places. And there's more examples in the extras, right? And what we're also doing is we're creating mixed content. So my JUnit examples project has a web page that links to the code. The code has READMEs. Inside the READMEs are links to videos, right? I'm creating on GitHub a web of content that pulls all the different types of content together, because we want it to be discoverable, but it's also demonstrating that GitHub is not just for code, all those different types of content. Sometimes if I want code and I can't be bothered creating a repo and it's too small, I'll create a gist, which is tiny little code snippets that I might then embed in a blog post or just a bookmark of code. There's so many ways of sharing things. And I have applications that are hosted on GitHub. So I've got a simple to-do list application that I used in one of my LinkedIn training courses, but the tool itself is open source and hosted on GitHub for free. Unbelievable benefits here. If you want to learn JavaScript and HTML, you can host any application that you write on GitHub for free, or on Netlify, because Netlify has free hosting for JavaScript and HTML and static blog sites. And if you're writing bigger applications, you can host them for free. I host my API challenges, my test pages, my Pulper, all the test apps that I have. And I have more apps than this, all hosted on Heroku in different places. Essentially for free, as long as you don't hit over a certain amount. And if you hit over a certain amount, then you're getting more popular, and it's probably of benefit to pay the $5 that it costs a month to have one of those machines. But it's so easy to get started. And if you want to learn continuous integration to improve your skill sets, to learn more about DevOps and how the productive system works, you can do that for free on Travis CI and GitHub Actions. I have projects that use both of these, so that when I commit code, it builds the code and goes through a full continuous integration pipeline. So this is Travis. I have an account on Travis, which links onto GitHub. So when I commit to GitHub, it automatically builds it. Now, the best thing about this for me is I've got continuous integration on my projects. I didn't have to set up Jenkins locally. I can run it against multiple different versions of JDK, which would be a real pain to set up. And it's visible and it's essentially open source. So if you went into my account, you can learn how to do this by looking at other people's examples. The same with GitHub Actions. GitHub Actions is like Travis. We've got whole CI process, so it builds when I check in. But the benefit is you can look at other people's projects and see how did they build this? What is the code for this? What are they doing? You can see the results of it. It's a fantastic way to learn how to do this and share how to do this. And people then see that you've built up experience in this and that you're improving your career prospects potentially because you do know about CI because you've got examples of it online. And in the olden days, it was so hard to do some of this stuff now. And pretty much everything I've shown you is free. There's no cost barriers to this. It's just the barriers to this are our objections, our time, how we're spending and sharing what we want to do. So I just want to, we're getting closer at the end now. I just want you to think, if you had to open source something now, what would it be? What knowledge would you outsource? Would you share? Would you make public? What experience have you had that you can help other people? Because I guarantee anything that you have learned, someone is just about to learn that, and your explanation of how you learned it could be just what they need. You could be open sourcing your experiences to help other people right now. And if you had to open source something now, what would it be? What could you share? And as soon as you think that, what are the objections? What comes into your head? So figure out why that appeared. What is stopping you from doing this? Remove the just the hassle by setting up accounts on all social media. Do that now if you haven't already done it. You can set up a blog very quickly on GitPages, Netlify, WordPress, or just use LinkedIn and articles. Get started there, then copy and paste it into a blog later on. But look at what is stopping you. And if you're thinking it's the lack of ideas, well then just think, well, what have you learned? What have you experienced? Share what stopped you doing things and how you overcame that. Share what you're going to try next. Get in the habit of sharing, because fundamentally we can all open source. Open source refers to something that people can modify. They'll modify your knowledge by learning about it, and they can share it because its design is publicly accessible. You blog, they can share your blog. You tweet, they can retweet your tweet. Now, if you want to look at the stuff that I kick out, you can look at the blogs, social media profiles, the code that I've got out there, videos, podcasts, because I've been doing this for 25 plus years and I've shared a lot of stuff. And for the last 8 years, what year is this? Since 2012, I've been sharing as much as humanly possible on a deliberate basis. And it's been so useful to me. And it's accumulated such a massive amount of stuff that I encourage you to do this. Open sourcing your knowledge is massively valuable to everyone else, and it will massively benefit you. All right, so let's have the Q&A. Thanks for watching. Hopefully we've got time for a live Q&A session now, and you can watch this again. But open source your stuff, that's the point.